Hey everybody, it's Christine at Zeidman Development, and today I'm going to walk you through how you can integrate the contact information in your Every Action database with the Raiser's Edge. So as you can see, I am on the Plugins tab in the database view of Raiser's Edge 7, and I have opened Importacular. And on the screen for Importacular, you can see that we have a range of different data sources, and the one we're working with today is, of course, Every Action. Now, I have already authenticated Every Action with my username and my API key. So if you haven't done that yet, when you first click on this, it will ask you for that information. But if you have done that, then you're going to be able to see just what I have in front of us. So I'm going to start by clicking on Every Action and clicking on the Start button. That's going to bring up our screen where we can do our data source criteria and we can decide what information we want to move over from Every Action into the Raiser's Edge. So you can see here that we have a date from that's going to default to the last time that you opened this, and we have a date to, and that's going to default to when you opened it today. Now, one note that you should be aware of with those dates is that you're only able to access information from the last 90 days. So if you access this farther out than that, you're going to have to change it. Or if you want to backdate it, you can only go as far back as 90 days. I am going to bump this just a little bit so we get a bit more data for you to see. We do have several different data processes, but for today, we're just going to focus on those contacts. Now, you can choose to work with suppressed and inactive records, but for today, I am going to leave that unchecked. I'm also going to move over all of my fields, so I'm going to go ahead and select everything and move it over. And I'm going to do the same with my contact fields. Now you could choose to just move over what you want, but for right now, I'm going to move all of those over. And I'm going to move that up just a bit so you can see I'm going to click on my submit. But before I do that, I do want to mention you can load and save these settings. So if you want to save a specific combination of these fields, you can absolutely do that with the save option and then just reload it next time. So let's go ahead and submit this and let's pull over our contact information. All right, our data has pulled, and now we have the option here to work with it and either create a new template or open an existing one. We can see that we have 16 records that have pulled through in that date range, and I've been looking at my Every Action data, and that does match what I expected. So I'm going to go ahead and I am going to work with a template that I've already built just because that's a little bit easier to show you. But just so you know, if this is your first template, you can access the ability to build a new template just by clicking on this circle with the plus sign. And then you can mimic what I'm working on here throughout. So I'm going to go ahead and open that template here. And then once I've selected my template to open it, I would click on the pencil. So let's do that. And now you can see we have our template. So we've got several different things here. We've got tabs across the top for each of the different areas that you can import data to. We call those our destinations. Now in my system, all of these are unlocked, and I have mapped data to several of them. In your system, the three that are always unlocked are constituent addresses and gifts. The rest can be added on as you need to customize your package. So yours may be different than mine, but your needs are obviously different than other organizations. So let us know if we can help you customize that. We're going to start on this constituents tab. And the first thing that we always start with is this constituent mappings here at the top. Now I have already used that, which is why it's grayed out. That is something you can only use once. But you can see what I did here under this constituent mapping. So I'm going to double click on that to open it so you can see what that looks like. Now, a couple things I want you to notice here. We've got 5 different columns across. So we have one that tells us our required fields. We have one that tells us our Raiser's Edge field names. We have our source fields that let us assign values from Every Action. We have our default values that allow us to assign values to these records that we want on there, but that wouldn't live in Every Action. So some things like our addressee and salutation. If we want a formula from the Raiser's Edge, those formulas wouldn't be in Every Action, but we can use this as a way to assign them. And then finally, we have the option to add some settings to make some changes. So for example, I don't want to add this addressee to any of my existing constituents. I trust what I have in Raiser's Edge more than I trust what's in that formula there. I don't want to assign William Smith to someone who's told me they always want to be referred to as Dr. William Smith. And the other thing that you can do is change things like the casing. So you can see that on the name fields, such as the last name, I've opted to make all of those last names proper case. So there's a lot of options that you can do with those field settings. They are dependent upon what field you're working with. But you can see I've assigned the last name from every action to the last name field. I've assigned the gender, I've assigned a deceased, I've assigned a date of birth to the birth date, things along those lines. Let's go ahead and close that mapping. You can see I've also added a constituent code. So I use this button over here to create a constituent code, and I'm assigning a constituent code of friend to all of these records. Now, I could also add a date from or a date to if I needed to. Lots of things I can do there. Now, if I wanted to track congressional information, I could use maybe a constituent attribute. That's available here as well, in addition to solicit codes, additional addressees and salutations, maybe if you want to track a recognition name or consent, if you need to track how people have said they want information. So a lot of different pieces there. I've only chosen to show you a sampling, but there's a lot available there. In addition, we have our address tab. And on here, I have mapped the donor or the contact's home address as well as their work address, an email address, and a phone number. So let's go ahead and open that address. So you can see here we've added the street address, the city, the country, the county, the state, the zip code, all of that information so that we can track it. We do have a few different field settings. So for our country, we have changed the information because our code table coming out of every action doesn't match our code table in Raiser's Edge. So we did a data transformation so that we could line up the data and get it entered exactly how we need it in the Raiser's Edge and not have any data cleanup on the back end. The other thing I do want to show you here is that we have those email addresses and phone numbers. So you can see here I've got email address. I'm tracking here directly if they've told me they don't want email. I'm going to mark those exactly so we know which email address shouldn't get email. And then I've added that phone number so we can see that here as well. Now we're going to get back to this work address in a minute, but before I show you that, I want to show you something I did on the optional module of organization relationships. So one of the things available to us in our drop-down for the contact is their employer. So let me show you that drop-down. We do have quite a bit of information. The fields that we moved over on that first screen, in addition to all of the key fields, the core fields that are available for these records. So I wanted to show you a way to track that employer. So I've done an organization relationship. Now you could do a constituent relationship or a non-constituent, and I have chosen to do a non-constituent. But I have created this where we've added their employer name as the organization name. We've added their occupation as a position. I'm using a date from the last updated date, and I've got employee and employer as my reciprocal and my relationship. So I've also added an address for that relationship. So you can see that work address there. That way we can track that information as being connected to the business. So I know that's a quick walkthrough of this template, but I'm going to go ahead and save and close our template so you can see what that would look like in the review screen with our sample data. So we're going to go ahead and just use a sample control report. If you're importing for real, I always recommend you create a new control report every time. But this is just a bit of sample, so it didn't follow that rule here. So you can see here in our review screen that we have the ability to see all of the data that was in our import. We can see what's going to happen in Raiser's Edge if we're going to create a new record, if we're going to update an existing record. If we are going to ignore it, we can choose to just send something to the control report and avoid updating Raiser's Edge altogether. Or if it's a decide, which means that it doesn't, in particular, didn't quite know if it matched Raiser's Edge or not, that it was a poor match in our criteria sets, and so you do need to review those. You can get very specific with this data. You can review it all across the board and see everything that's been set up here. So you can tell what's going to happen in the Razor's Edge. You can see that when information is blank, it does get ignored automatically. So those who don't have an organization name won't have a blank organization relationship, but those who do will have a relationship created. So a lot of good pieces to be able to review there. And you can also search Razor's Edge to see if this person already exists. So if we think Bob Jones is in Razor's Edge, we can always do a quick search to see. Don't have anybody under the name Bob Jones. Let's just try Jones. So maybe we don't have him in our system, but it's always good to be able to check. Once you've checked over everything and you're ready, you can validate that data, make sure that everything works. And if you validate and it works, then you can always uncheck and you can import that data and create and update your records. And in this case, we would also be adding organization relationships at the same time as we're adding our constituents. I hope this helps give you an idea of how the contacts from every action can be updated in the Razor's Edge using Importacular. If you have any questions, as always, our team is happy to help. Thank you so much and have a great day.